Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio.
Some of the traditional ways, the psychological ways that they say you're supposed to do 12 stages, blah, 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 sort of thing, it kind of, it's trying to force people to work against nature. So that was one of the things I liked about your process was you...
Oh, thanks. I never even thought about that.
You work with nature.
Yeah, I kind of work with what works for people. There isn't like saying... you're supposed to be doing this and this and this. I really believe that we all have our own inner wisdom, that intuition, that is telling us what we need. Yeah. We're just not listening to it.
There it is. No, we're not listening to it. With that being said, why don't we get started? Welcome back, everybody. Our next guest is a bereaved mom and grief coach. Marie is a passionate advocate for normalizing grief and dedicated to empowering grieving hearts. As a bereaved mom and a grief coach, Marie has transformed her profound loss into a mission to support others. After the passing away of her son and the pressure to conform to traditional stages of grief, Marie created a unique program to help women navigate their grief journey. Her approach focuses on letting go of self-judgment and finding pockets of peace. I like what Marie is saying with this, and grief is normal, and we're at some point or another we all will go through it. And for myself, having lost a few loved ones, that I know that I'll see something that reminds me of them, and you have a moment of grief, and then you move on. But it's not something that you just have to let go of your loved ones. It's also about, for me, it's a process of holding on to the memories and keeping that person alive in my heart. So, with that being said, why don't we give a warm welcome to Marie as we introduce her to the show. Welcome to the show, Marie. It's great to have you. I always love meeting up with you. It's pretty fun. um, so of course, it says bereaved mom and coach. Well, the bereaved mom definitely comes first, doesn't it? So,
It really does.
what happened in your life, and why don't we go through that just for a few minutes so people can kind of understand who you are?
Okay, well, thank you, Michael. And I want to say thank you. I always love chatting with you and being your guest. It's always a delight. Yeah, I know. Finally have chosen to be a bereaved mom. For the longest time, I used to say I was a griever, a grieving mom. Because I used to put grief in there and people would go, oh, it just happened. And it's like, no, it happened many years ago. So my son, long story short, I mean, my son had cancer, blood cancer, leukemia for 11 years. And, we went through that cycle of ups and downs of cancer, and it just became a way of life. The reason I'm saying this is because a lot of people have always told me, but you knew he was going to die. I kind of look at it going, yeah, we all know we are, but it still doesn't stop us from living. So part of that was, yes, I knew my son had cancer. He knew he had cancer. We had been living with it for 11 years, and kind of, you sort of think, yeah, this is the way life is going to be constantly. So this is what we got used to. This is what we thought. So when he did die, it was unexpected. And because of that, and I always go, whether you know that someone has an illness, whether they don't, there is still that shock when someone passes away, especially when it's your loved one, because the expectation is that they're still going to be there forever. And that is what, so I kind of went into this numbness, like all of a sudden your heart feels like it's shattered into pieces. I went into this numbness of wanting to wake up going, this must be a bad dream. Like, I don't even like horror movies. Why am I in one? And so that's almost like for the first year is what I kind of felt like, that when was I going to wake up? And every time I heard a noise, it's almost like, okay, I'll just turn around and he'll be there. And a lot of people, and this is one of the reasons why I became a grief coach, is because a lot of times people will say, oh, there's these stages. You're in that denial stage. Well, it's not really a denial because I knew who had died. It's just sometimes I think our brain is protecting us because all of a sudden it's a shock to our system. We're thinking we're in a bad dream that we're going to wake up from. And we're kind of like, so they'll just turn around and they'll be there. And yes, I'll know that it's a bad dream, which of course didn't happen. And then as my journey in grief had gotten, then it's almost like, I always go, people kind of think that once the funeral is over, that's it. You're back to what was. And it's kind of like, yeah, no, my son died. When your loved one passes away, there is no back to normal. And then what I found was, as the years went by, I was getting told more and more about, why am I not better? Why am I stuck? Why am I still blah, blah, blah into the grieving? And so what I found is that I was regressing in the sense of repressing my feelings, being more like, presenting this mask up to the public, going, oh yeah, everything's fine, because I was still working, things like that. But underneath, it felt a total mess. So I kind of go for 10 years. I felt like I lost who I was and I lost my life because I don't remember. It's a blur. So for 10 years, it kind of felt like I was stuck. I was going through the motions of life, but I wasn't really present. Like if you were to tell me what was in there, I kind of like, I don't know. I look at life as the before and after. Before my son was alive, after my son. And that's how I can only remember things.
Yeah. Well, That's wow. That was pretty heavy. And you must have been pretty close with your son.
I think one of the things is that we had a relationship, and also because of his cancer, I was the one that was always went to his appointments. So my son was 16 when he was diagnosed, and he was 27 when he passed away. But I went to all of his appointments. I was basically, as he used to call me, I was his PR person. So whenever he was in the hospital, I actually moved in, usually. And if they didn't allow me to move in, I'd be there like first thing in the morning and leave at the last person to be there, and then kind of do that whenever he was. So he kind of knew that I was there. I would do I'd call the grunge work. Patients when in the hospital, they want their pillows changed. They want the water. They want and they can't get up. So of course they're clicking, right? Asking for the nurses. Well, the nurses are overworked.
Right.
And so I kind of look at it going, we're actually doing a service doing this grunge work. Like, I'm not saying, it's beneath me or anything, because of course this is my child. I don't care how old he is. I would be doing it. You go get the extra blankets. You go get the little things that they need. You flip over a pillow. You move them over.
Well, I kind of understand that one because I have two children, and with God's graces, they're both healthy and doing well. But when they were born, they is a medical term is called HELP syndrome. My wife at the time suffered from it, and the other one, my other ex-wife, she had she could get pregnant, she could carry, but there was a certain point where she started getting sick automatically because of something with her wound, But so they both had to spend a lengthy amount of time in the hospital. And it's like, of course, when I would go there before going to work. I would get up, start my day, get myself all ready, go to the hospital, fluff her pillows, make sure she had lots of juice, and all of those little itty bitty things that they said, oh, the nurse could do that. Oh, well, I did all those little itty bitty things instead of allowing the nurse to do it because that's the person that I loved.
Yeah,
it's like, so no, it's not beneath you. You it's an act of love. And
that is so true. And one of the things also is that, for the patient, whether it was your ex or my son, they actually feel more comfortable that they have someone there that is actually looking after them and is doing things out of love. And I think that also helps them in their recovery, or even in making them feel comfortable. I mean, I know with my son, every time he was in the hospital, when I was there, he felt secure. It was like, I know my mom's got my back, right? Because I would also be his advocate. Like, if he couldn't speak, I would be the one who would speak. I would be the one who would look out for what changes there were. And this isn't about putting the medical field down, because they are doing an excellent job of what they can. Again, they have so many different patients. They can only be in one spot at one time, and they can't see everything.
Right. That's the whole point. It is like when our loved one is in the hospital, it's like we have one patient. Well, the doctor and the nurses, they still have a whole floor. So if I can assist them a little bit, and at the same time, I'm providing love for my loved one who is there, right? So,
So true.
So this went on. You said for what is it, 11 years?
11 years, yeah. It's one of those things where I always go, when cancer enters your life, you kind of get used to that roller coaster ride. I mean, there were highs and lows of, things seemed to go fine, and all of a sudden we were in crisis mode.
Yeah.
Where you needed emergency surgeries, you needed treatment. So, yeah, I mean, basically, so I went with him to all of his appointments, whether it was with the oncologist, whether he was having treatments. Like, I would be the one who would be sitting beside him. If he had emergency surgeries, I would be the one. I mean, okay, I wasn't in the operating room because they wouldn't allow me in there.
No, they're not going to let you in there. But yeah, but he knew your spirit was there with him still, right?
Yeah, and I would be sitting at the hospital in the waiting room. So and I think that's part of sort of knowing that someone's there for you.
Yeah.
Right? Because that would be something that I would always tell him. I can't be there physically for you, but I'm surrounding you. And I would say who I'm sending in with him, from the spirit realm.
Yeah. Well, why not, right? Because I totally believe in the spirit realm, and those who are listening, they know that I actually did an interview with a lady who definitely speaks with angels. And it was probably because of that we actually found each other. So.
Oh, yeah.
I don't believe in blind chances. There's cause and effect. So.
Yes. Yeah. Right. Yeah. We're supposed to meet the people we're supposed to meet, and that's even some of the things that I found even when we were in the hospital. I think because of what I was doing, it actually gave courage to other people to kind of go, hey, I can do what she's doing. And there were other people that ended up, I remember speaking to a woman whose husband was in the hospital, and she kind of went, Marie, I saw what you did. So I kind of went, yeah, I'm moving in here too.
There you go. And the hospital does provide sometimes that ability for you to move in. Sometimes. I'm not going to say all the time.
Sometimes it does, and I just kind of did anyways, whether they wanted it or not.
Well,
yeah. So sometimes I wasn't the well-liked person in the hospital.
But that's that's your empowerment part.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
And so this is it. I mean, this is what the woman said. She kind of goes, she probably saved her husband's life because in the middle of the night he fell, and she had been there and had seen that. Because otherwise, sometimes, you fall, no one's there.
That's another problem that we're going to see for another time, because that could be quite the rabbit hole.
It is, yeah. We won't go down that way.
We're not going down that rabbit hole today.
When we have conversations, we kind of go off a tangent. Yeah. I will stay on topic.
Yeah. But I can kind of understand, because I've heard this story out of another grief specialist that I know, and I'm going to actually give Laura Lane a bit of a shout out there, and tell people that they should, if they have a kid, especially a young kid in the hospital, that there's a product out there called the Stronger Planner. And if you go to strongerplanner.com, that you will find Laura Lane's work on that. But she said something in her story, something similar to what you did. It's like cancer just moves in. It's that guest, that unexpected guest that just doesn't want to leave your family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, my attitude is a little bit different. I know my son, when he was first diagnosed, had become depressed, understandably so. He's 16 years old. Nobody wants to be told, right, that you have something. And so I kind of let him handle it for a while, and then afterwards. So for me, how I reframed it, I'm going to say reframed, is that instead of using the word cancer, I just went, you have a blood condition.
Okay.
All right. And kind of went, look, We're all different. We all have things that sometimes we're aware of, sometimes maybe we're not aware of.
Yeah.
So saying it as a condition was almost like saying, hey, you got blue eyes, somebody else has brown eyes, some people have diabetes, some people have epilepsy. So we'll treat it as that, and we'll just take it one day at a time, because we don't know what's going to happen. The doctors didn't know what was going to happen because it was a rare blood disease that he had.
Yeah.
And so they were kind of like, we don't know what's going to happen. We'll just give him treatment when he needs it, kind of thing. And so has things happened. And so that's the attitude that we ended up taking. And so as soon as you say it's a condition, all of a sudden it's downplayed, right? Like people around you start downplaying it. Rather than the big C, it becomes a little c.
Yeah. Well, my wife, she actually has anemia. And it's still a blood condition, and at times, if I don't pump enough iron into her, she falls flat on her face. I'm joking, of course, but
Yes.
but she has trouble getting up and doing stuff. So. And blood is extremely important to us because it carries all those nutrients, oxygen, all that sort of stuff. And when you have a malfunction with it, it shows, and it usually shows up pretty quick, doesn't it?
You know what? I guess one of the aspects in regards to my son, a lot of times on the outside, you really wouldn't know what was going on. But on the inside, it really was, because part of what he had also affected his bone marrow. And so, like, our bodies are really great. They produce all these things that I'm not in the medical field, but I know it's magical. and
Yes,
and when
it is.
something isn't working, the magic kind of goes off. It's like watching a magic trick, and you can see how someone's, that was a terrible trick, right? But when it's done artfully, you're in awe. Like, It's like, wow, look at that great magician. So in actual fact, I think our bodies are like that, in awe. Like when it's done right, it is magical, awe-inspiring. And when something isn't right, you're right, it's off balance or off kilter, sort of.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's what was happening with my son. So I know one of the doctors explained my son's, I don't know if it's the blood vessel. He goes, think of it as a highway. This one is blocked. Like it's, the highway that it's at a standstill. It's like bumper to bumper. So now the blood has to use secondary arteries, like the secondary streets. But they're getting busy now too,
Right.
because it's getting plugged up. So then so when we're dealing with like what he had, and then part of the blood was also wasn't producing something right. Like his platelets were up, and so it was producing like a solid mass, and everything was getting plugged up. So a lot of things. So part of it, which sometimes people didn't understand, is that a common cold for my son could also be life-threatening.
Yeah.
Because basically, if he were to cough and stuff like that, he could start throwing up blood, and we'd have to go to the emergency, even a nosebleed, because he was also on blood thinner to make sure that the blood was, right? Like that's what people are on, blood thinners. So there were a lot of things going on, but nobody saw it because it was all happening on the inside, and then it was affecting his other organs.
Yeah.
And so with our organs, you don't see it because everything's happening inside. And so I think with my son, part of it was he didn't really want people to know what he had. So he, would still go to the gym when he could. He'd work out. I mean, when you looked at him, you would thought he was a GQ model kind of thing.
Well, I have to say that's good for him because it probably helped extend that 11 years. It's extended to the 11 years.
Oh, it probably did. And I think even a oncologist had kind of said that because I had reframed it. We weren't focusing on, oh my God, you have cancer. What are we going to do? It was like, yeah, okay, you got cancer. It's a blood condition. What are we doing about it? We'll just, it's an everyday fact. And I think that's when it is when we say it moves in with us. You just kind of go, yeah, stuff happens. Sometimes you have an emergency surgery. So, we'll deal with it as it is, sort of thing.
Yeah, we can trip over. This is actually a real life thing. This actually did happen. Somebody tripped over their daughter's cat, and they wound up in emergency surgery. It was a series of surgeries over 5 years. But hey, you don't know what's going to happen in the next seconds, right?
No.
If you take that approach,
I always go, so from the cancer is now shifted to grief has moved in. So I always go, grief now is my companion. It just walks with me.
Well, depending on how you frame that, that's not so bad.
Well, I think grief has this thing where everyone looks at it like, oh, she's constantly sad. I always go, if you really want to empty a room out, just go in and go, hey, I'm in grief. I'm grieving. And people will just walk towards the other side trying to see how fast they can get out of the door. People are uncomfortable speaking about grief because what a lot of people expect is they're going to get someone who is, teary-eyed, sad, crying. And I think this is how even the movies kind of portray it. Yes, some people, that is how we deal with our emotions. And that's okay because we're all, I look at it, emotions are emotions. And think of it as someone who's excited who wins the lottery. You're going to have somebody who's jumping up and down and just shouting and whatever. And then you're going to have someone who quietly goes, yeah, I won. Is either one right in how they do things? No, they're both are. That's how their personality works.
Right.
And grief is the same thing. We're going to deal with it however we deal with emotions. And yes, at times the emotions are so overwhelming that it is going to be more of, I'm not going to say demonstrative, but a lot of times we ourselves don't even know what we're feeling because some is so undescribable in how much the pain is.
Yeah. With that being said, for myself, one of my best friends passed away, and I found myself at some point I was just becoming a little too snappy at people, a little too much sarcasm, and it was something that happened, and it was like a mirror appeared and said, "Oh, I need to sit down with someone." And I want to. I'm saying that because I also want people out there who are listening to like, hey, do you need that mirror? Do you need that mirror to appear for you so that you know when you need the help? They need to sit down with you and talk about it because grief appears in different ways, and sometimes we need help dealing with it, right?
Well, we need help, and I always go support. So I'm more of a peer-to-peer, right? So I'm not a counselor. I'm not a therapist. So for me, it's about acknowledging where someone is and meeting them exactly where they're at. Because in our grief journeys, we're all going to be at a different spot, a different place. And part of it sometimes is, as you said, it's bringing that awareness or recognizing what we're feeling. And it's natural sometimes to be snappy. Sometimes we can be snappy because we're saddened by what has happened and someone else may be laughing and things like that. And we're kind of like, what the heck are you laughing for? I know I kind of get snappy when I'm at a funeral because I'm thinking people shouldn't, depending on what it is, if a family or someone has lost their loved one, take your conversation outside. Don't be in front of that family unless, of course, you're sharing stories about
Yes.
their person. But most of the time, they're not. And that, I think, is what happens in grief, is that all of a sudden we have the people who we think are our friends or family, those who we love, are going to talk about our person. And yet what happens is they kind of are silent. And that silence hurts even more. Because as we remember someone, because I always go, look, my son lived, I will never forget him. And so if that makes me a bereaved mom because I'm missing him, so be it. And if someone doesn't like it, that's their problem, not mine. However, when someone else mentions my son and says stories about him, that actually, yes, it could bring sadness, but it also brings joy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? Because it's through us and through the stories that they are actually kept, their memories are alive. We know that they touched and impacted other people's lives.
Yeah.
And sometimes in grief, it feels uncomfortable because nobody wants to talk about them. I mean, they use about, oh, well, we thought it would make you sad. Well, guess what? I'd rather be sad and someone talking about him than someone kind of almost pretending that he never existed.
You know what? I totally understand that. We need to keep sharing the stories because it's my personal belief that if we keep sharing the stories, that they say that they're kept alive.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I get what you're saying though. Is like we need to keep talking and keep talking about who the person was and everything, right? Even if it is right in front of you, it's like if we were talking about your son in front of you, that actually, especially if it's a happy story, it kind of makes you feel good. That he was happy, that he found that happiness, right?
Well, I think too, part of it is that it's be the same as your friend, in the sense of he would have had other friends. So if those other friends share stories, sometimes that is a side that maybe you hadn't seen of your friend. Or if your friend's parents share stories about him, that would be something that is a different aspect that you may not have known.
Yeah.
Right? It's not good or bad. It's just something that sometimes, I look at my son and I'm going, I wouldn't have known every aspect of him because as his mom, there are things that I know but he would share different things with his friends, or the experiences would be different of what he would share.
Yeah.
And hearing those stories is kind of like, wow, it's kind of like, it really does. It brings like this enlightenment and joy. I always go, in grief, different emotions can coexist. Grief is actually a complex emotion. I'm going to call grief an emotion. And it's complex. And it's basically saying, look, sadness and joy can coexist. You can be sad and you can be happy. You could be angry and you could be sad. So there's a lot of emotions all together. And yet I'm like, we accept it outside of grief. However, we kind of don't want it inside of grief. Does that make sense?
Kind of. Let's elaborate a little more on that.
Right. I always go, I still have not met a person who is happy 24/7.
No.
There's this, right? Like so when we're living life, we have different emotions. Mm-hmm. People are activated by different sense. Just in normal life without even experiencing loss.
Yeah.
And when we experience loss, all of a sudden, the outside world, all of a sudden, it's almost like, well, you are allowed to have these emotions. Anything else after that means you have to be better or you're stuck.
Oh.
And yet, life
okay.
still happens, right? It's kind of like it's intertwined. I'm
Well,
doing this dance of intertwining.
yeah, okay, then I kind of get what you're saying with that, right? Because, um, like my friend, I'm actually sitting in her last office chair.
Oh,
You know, and I have a little box of stuff that was hers, and she told me we never actually had a chance to talk about what was supposed to go where because hers was a sudden thing. It was an accident. Um, and I have the Buddhist bowl, the singing bowl. I have
oh yeah.
her singing bowl, and every now and again it's like I get stuck on something that she would have helped me with, and I play with the bowl, and I sit in the chair, and it's like, and all of a sudden an answer comes to me, you know, sort of thing like that. But it's like, but I tried to all of my loved ones that have passed on. I try to make sure I have something that I'm still surrounded by their memory.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess maybe some would say that there's something wrong with that, and others would say there's nothing wrong with that. That's an
Yeah.
opinion.
And part of that when you're sharing, and I thank you so much for sharing, is that when you're thinking of the bowl and it's hers, you have emotions that come up. They could be sadness because she's not there, but there's also the joy or the delight in knowing that this bowl was hers and you have it.
Yeah. Well, the sadness is because I put it like this. I said sometimes you just wish that you could pick up the phone and call them and tell them, hey, this is where I'm stuck right now. Can you help me?
Yeah.
Well, you can't do that. We don't have a phone line that works that way. But if you have something that you remember being full of their energy, it's like that energy is still there.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And I always go, and I thank you so much for sharing, is that that's what we need to have more of. That's why I'm on a mission to normalize the conversation around grief, is to actually be able to say, I can share these stories about her or about our loved ones that are no longer here and be okay with that and be acknowledged for the missing of the physical presence.
Yeah.
And that's really what I think I'm more about, is sort of saying, look, there is no right or wrong way to grieve. Like, I really totally believe that the 5 stages, I mean, they were never really meant for grief, but I don't know how they ended up getting there. They were supposed to be meant for the 5 stages of the dying. And I'm like, and I think even for the 5 stages of the dying, they probably are out. I mean, I'm going to call it the BS. Because, you know what, like, when has life fit into neat boxes? So all of a sudden death is going to fit into a neat box? Or our
so,
emotions
right?
or grief? And I'm like, no, like, why are we having like these boxes that we're supposed to tick? Yes, there may be aspects of, people like to say, like, we're in the denial stage or the anger. Well, you know, and a lot of times we can be in a denial of a lot of things. All right. I kind of look at it. I know that sugar isn't good for me, but sometimes when I'm eating something, I'm in denial of what's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, what do you think of this? That, like, the picture frame that's behind you, people
Yeah.
want that to be grief, that it's framed nice and neat. See, here I have it, and then they put it back on the wall.
Yeah, that's pretty much what people sort of think. It's this nice, neat box. We put it in, we're done, we're complete. I think a lot of people I mean, we're in an instant society. And I can't say that it's just from this. I think for the longest time, I mean, even throughout history. Yes, there were rituals that people followed, and I have no idea when it kind of started, where you're sort of thinking people stopped talking about the people who died. It was almost like, don't say their names.
Yeah.
And you're like, why? Like, I never understood that. It was almost like they don't exist anymore. And I think that what makes us all more fearful and actually adds more stress to ourselves, especially to someone who has experienced the loss of their loved one.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden it's kind of like you feel alone, like isolated, like there's no one to talk to. You can't share your emotions. And that's really what I'm all about, is I want someone to share what their experience is, to say, I acknowledge what you went through. It's without judgment, because it's like with everything else. I mean, as you said, the picture behind me, I really like it. That's why it's behind me. You may look at it and go, Maria, like, that picture is crap. Like, why the heck do you have it?
Yeah.
Now, both of us are both right.
Yeah.
Because it's from our own perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is what grief is like, is that it's from our own perspective. And so making someone incorrect because of their feelings, how can that be? Like,
Yeah, that's a no such thing sort of thing.
yeah.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, because I want to touch on the empowerment part, because that is a major thing. How do you help people empower themselves in grief? How does that process actually take place?
So how it takes place is that I have the 5 pillars of care, like CARE, that I use as a acronym. And part of it is about giving yourself compassion. A lot of times I think we're so judgmental on ourselves, right? We do this thing about that we have what we should have done, what we could have done, what we would have done, even with our own emotions. I shouldn't be feeling this. I shouldn't be. And so that's like our inner voice or our inner dialogue that we're giving ourselves. And so by giving ourselves compassion, there's a way to soften that and to release it. Because a lot of times is that we're dealing in hindsight, right? Like it's like, and I'm going to use the lottery as an example, because that's an easy one for people to understand. Once the numbers are called, we know what the numbers are. And some of us will go, why didn't I pick those numbers? Well, that is hindsight. And that sometimes is the same thing with grief. We know things now that we didn't know back then. And so we may say things like, oh, why did I give them the keys? Why did they go in that car? Why did they drive down that street? I should have kept them here. No, I mean, even for myself, I would be like, how come I didn't find the cure for cancer? They still haven't, but how come I didn't? I mean, I'm a mom, I'm super mom. So we kind of give ourselves this, we believe we had superpowers. And if we go back to the magician, it's almost like we've had this magic wand that has been dormant, that we forgot to use. Well, we don't have this magic wand. And we can't change things even in hindsight. Yeah. And that is our mind who is saying that we have control. Because a lot of times, because we had no control, our mind wants to give us that we had control. It's like that oxymoron thing.
Yeah.
Right? And so that is part of what we need to release. And so basically that's what I kind of do, is working with your intuition. I always go, we all have our inner wisdom. Right. It's how do we listen to it?
Yeah.
Because our intuition knows what's right for you. And that's basically what the grief work is. It's not about, okay, here's these neat boxes, you need to do this, this, and this. It's individual. It's individual of what is best for you, what works for you. And being acknowledged and validated that you have a right to your pain and that your experience is validated and you and your grief are validated.
Yeah. That makes sense. So,
our time's up.
Yeah.
This happens when we have a conversation. We can just go on and on.
And every time we meet, we usually do go on and on. It's like, oh, yeah. So, I'm just going to say this way. Best ways to get a hold of you and work with you, because there's a lot of people out there that need your help.
Yeah. So email me at hope@mariabelanic.com. Right. And I think I sent a free gift for your audience, right? About Five Compassion.
Let's go over the free gift.
Yeah. So I really, truly believe that we need to give ourselves compassion. And so for that, that's one of the gifts that I've given is how do you give yourself compassion? And the guide goes through that. So there's little exercises that go through about that. And I always go, compassion's going to look different. It really is individualized in regards of showing yourself kindness, right? Like we think we give it to everyone else, except for our own selves. And it's our own selves that really need it more so, because it's about honoring who we are. Because a lot of times we're rejecting who we are.
Yeah, agreed. A lot of times we tried to fight upriver against who we actually are.
Yeah, and in grief even more so, right? We want to hide, we want to push down all of this. And what I've learned is that when I accepted that grief was going to be in my life, that's why I said at the very beginning, grief walks with me.
Yeah.
And grief has many faces. Like just because I call myself a bereaved mom, I can still laugh. I can still enjoy life at this moment. However, I will still have moments of sadness where sometimes maybe getting out of bed is really hard.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah, it is okay. And it's like being bereaved is something that people don't want to hear, but hey, we all eventually are going to be walking with grief, and we should embrace it, right? To a point.
Yeah.
I'm
going to say, like, I have brown hair. Yeah. So I'm using, bereavement as, I have brown hair. One day, maybe I'll have red hair. Yeah. But bereaved it's still hair. But again, it's about acknowledging rather than hiding.
Right. So thank you for your time today. This has been wonderful. You do wonderful work for people, and I'm glad you're a friend.
So am I. I know. You're always a delight to talk to, Michael. I think that's why we always go on and on.
Yeah. So thank you for listening, everybody. Find that subscribe button wherever it is. And remember, if you do need help with your grief and that mirror has popped up in front of you and says, oh, yeah, I do need to work with Marie, go to hope at Maria Belanic.
Or my website is mariabelanic.com.
Yeah. And that'll be in the show notes, guys. So along with the free gift. Okay?
Help us to go.
This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.